I am interested in one question. But first the background. Night. New Jersey. The father will be the son and tells him about the device. We're on our way. They drive out of town, lie down on the grass in a field, and look up. His father explains to him science, meteor shower, stars, distance. The son doesn't listen. He just watches the lights cut the sky. This boy is 5 years old, and his name is Steven Spielberg. After 11 years, he is 16. He lives in Arizona, and there in Arizona, he is writing a script and shooting a full-length film about a scientist obsessed with UFOs, about the abduction of people by aliens. The budget is $500. Show one night at the local cinema. The cash register is $501. The profit is exactly $1. Then this schoolboy made his way to the Universal Studio. I bought a suit, took a briefcase, and passed by security every day as an employee. The guards thought he was their own 4 months, and by that time, the best film school in the country had already refused him 3 times. The grades were bad, the questionnaire was not the same. And off it went. Jaws. Hollywood is forever changing the format of releases. 1982. An Alien. The tape overtakes Star Wars. 1993. It simultaneously removes 2 films. In the afternoon, Schindler's List in Poland. Among the extras are real survivors from. At night, on the phone from Krakow, he mounts Jurassic Park, which overtakes The Alien, and becomes the highest-grossing film in the history of cinema by that time. Both films won 7 Oscars in 1 year, then Save Private Ryan. Another Oscar $10 billion in total fees. More than James Cameron, the author of Titanic and Avatar. But here's what's strange. With Schindler, dinosaurs, Indiana Jones, Spielberg keeps returning to one topic, neither to war, nor to history, but to what was considered indecent society at that time, as if frivolous. And moreover, many people today treat this as some kind of a cringe, namely the topic of UFOs. And the longer you look at his films, his interviews and his connections in Washington, the more the question arises. Question. Was he just shooting fiction, or did he know more than he was saying? 1977. Spielberg just took the jaws off and turned Hollywood upside down. And instead of consolidating success with another thriller, he makes a film about UFOs, not science fiction. In the spirit of Star Wars, where aliens are just a decoration. No. Spielberg spends several years studying the real scientist, Dr. Allen Hynek. Yes, the same Joseph Allen Hynek, whom the US Air Force hired as a consultant to the Blue Book or Blue Book program, which was officially engaged in history, investigation of unidentified flying objects from the United States. Hynek started out as a skeptic, but after analyzing hundreds of UFO sightings, he changed his mind. He found the witness statements very reliable, Spielberg said, and came to the conclusion that the government was probably hiding something. And yes, I'm talking about the legendary band Spielberg, called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But between us, it is correct to say, Close Contacts of the Third Kind. The very name of the film is a classification of Hynek. Contact of the first kind UFO sightings. The second is physical traces. The third is direct contact with beings. By the end of the film, Hynek appears in the frame in person. An elderly man with a pipe who pushes through a crowd of scientists in order to see the ship with his own eyes. A man who has studied UFOs all his life stands and watches as the ship lands. By the way, an interesting fact. When Spielberg's team applied to the Pentagon to be provided with a platform just for the final scene, the Pentagon officially refused, citing the fact that this contradicts the official policy of the Ministry of Defense, the US Air Force, according to which no UFOs exist. Moreover, no one is involved in hiding this information. Anyway, Spielberg shot without them, and got complete freedom to show exactly what the military did not want to see on the screen. And then there was an episode that is still being talked about, but with a different film. In 1982, Reagan organized a private screening of an alien at the White House, the next Spielberg movie. When the credits ended, the president stood up and said, "There are people in this room who know that everything shown on the screen is absolutely true." The room laughed. Reagan said as if in jest, but he did not smile. Spielberg recalled in 2011. So who is Steven Spielberg really? Just another director who likes fiction very much, or a person who has been trying to show us something for 60 years, and we very carefully refuse to see it. Or, in fact, he knows much more than his artistic language shows. And if we are looking for an answer to this question, then we should turn to another person, Jacques Vallée, a French scientist, astrophysicist, computer expert, one of the first UFO researchers whose the work was carried out not on the sidelines of science, but inside it. He created the first computer databases of UFO sightings, worked for DARPA, collected data from SARPANET, the prototype of the modern Internet. And the direct supervisor of Jacques Vallée was not someone, but Joseph A. Allen Hynek himself. Spielberg read the books of Jacques Vallée in the early 70s, and when he was filming Close Contacts, he took Vallée as the basis for the central character of the film, a French scientist played by François Truffaut. And here's what's interesting. While the filming of Close Contacts of the Third Kind was going on, Vallée did not agree with a script by Spielberg. He believed and tried to convince him that the phenomenon might not be extraterrestrial, but he was physically present here. It's just that we haven't found the proper language to explain it yet. However, Spielberg insisted on his own, and removed the way he sees the picture. And what is surprising is that by the end of the 1970s, Jacques Vallée had so much data about the phenomenon that he believed that the picture of its existence, which many people who are used to leafing through TikTok without stopping, could not place in their heads. And now about what happened behind the scenes. 1978. The film has just grossed and won the Oscars. At that time, a young New York journalist, Le Spiegel, was preparing a speech at the UN. He wanted the United Nations to officially investigate the UFO phenomenon. Heine Kovail is with him. When the preparation for the presentation reached the final stage, Spielberg invited the whole group to his Hollywood office to discuss how he could help. In other words, a person did not just make a movie about UFOs. No, he was serious about this topic. And now, almost 50 years after the Close Ones, Contacts of the Third Degree, Spielberg again takes up the film on the subject of UFOs. This time, the film is not addressed to some alien, but is directly a manifesto. Disclosure Day is no longer a doubt, it's not a hypothesis, it's a statement that it's time to disclose. Society and information that we are not alone here. Well, we in turn can see what references to the end of ufology there are in this film. So I'm sorry if you suddenly thought that here we will raise the names of Tarkovsky, Sorrentin, Antonioni, Fellini, or Paul Thomas Anderson, or Wes Anderson, or Jim Jarmusch, or maybe David Fincher, or maybe Tarantino, or Francis Ford Coppola, or maybe even Martin Scorsese. No, this channel is dedicated to a completely different topic, namely UFOs. So let's switch to the frames from the trailers for the film and look at what references to the end of ufology they contain.
We are interrupting our coverage.
How will disclosure change us? I believe for the better. It will remind us of our capacity for empathy, and that there is something bigger out there than just ourselves. Spielberg is a strange voice with which the heroine Emily Blunt begins to speak during a live broadcast. So it's a strange voice. Emily Blunt refers us to the events that took place in 1896 and 1897, when extremely strange airships were observed on the territory of the United States of America, some of which did not fit into the usual chronology of technology development. The other part of the fixation, in principle, could be. It can be explained by non-standard airships, which may have been produced at that time, but it is strange, because by those days, there were no mass production of airships, much less on the territory of the United States of America. But it doesn't matter, then it means. So, a colonel named Shaw himself, in 1896, we know about it thanks to the saved notes in the newspapers, stumbled upon a strange creature that just descended to him from an airship. And this creature was making an extremely unusual muttering. Just the same, Spielberg fixes it in his video for the film. There is simply no other mention of such non-standard muttering in the end of ufology. It is recorded in a single copy in a newspaper of those days in 1896. And the event itself is called mysterious. Airships, mystery airships that date back to 1896 and 1897. Such cases. Then one obvious thing can be noted. Through Emily Blunt, someone says, when a person is used as some kind of radio through which a signal is broadcast, this is called transgeneraling. This phenomenon is called transcending, were interested not only ufologists, but the armed forces of the United States, because it is financed. The next scientist, whose name is Andrei Puharich, can be called Andrei Puharich. And yes, his research, his work has been for some time, even classified, and communicated with the collective, not even with collective entity called the 99. Andrei had contact with these incomprehensible clients thanks to two channelers who entered a trance state, and then through them. The 9 communicated with Andrei, and he recorded everything that these comrades were telling him, who, by the way, claimed to be connected. I'm Andrei Puharich. I'm a physician by training, a research scientist by choice, and I've spent the last 25 years investigating people with unusual powers. A fragment where animals enter the house and seem to start communicating with a person. And also the deer in the last video, changing its appearance to the devil understand who. This is called in ufology screen memory or substitute memory. The term itself, by the way, belongs to SIG. This term was integrated into lorofology by two people, Bat Hopkins and David Jacobs, after analyzing hundreds of audio recordings of regressive hypnosis of people who claimed to have been abducted by the same ones. But again, there are no guarantees that they are from there. For those who are really interested in ufology, and for those who are not interested, I will also tell you, it's not a fact that they are on top. Just keep in mind. In short, the point is what? Try to imagine a typical gray alien with his big black eyes. So, this alien really cares about you, and before he kidnaps you, he will think about whether your psyche will withstand his natural appearance. And if he decides, or they decide collectively, that you should not remember this, they will create substitute memories, where various animals will be present instead of them, in order to cover up the real event that took place with the person they kidnapped or will kidnap. Therefore, when David Lynch decided, the director says that the owls are not what they seem. Second, owls are not what they seem. He refers, for example, to this. Or Steven Spielberg, when he shows our reindeer, he sends them away. Just the same to this term in the end, not even a term at all, but a phenomenon in the end of ufology, which is called screen memory or substitute memory. Another fragment of the trailer that deserves attention lasts literally 3-4 seconds. Within this segment, we see bodies being taken out of the refrigerator, let's assume, aliens. And also we can fix two figures in tuxedos in the frame. Most likely, this is the 37th President of the United States of America, Richard Nixon, as well as actor Jackie Gleason. In ufology, there is some kind of bike. Allegedly, Nixon and Gleason were drinking. Then Nixon suggested to Gleason, "Listen, I want to show you one very strange and interesting thing." And they called a helicopter. This helicopter flew to the White House, after which they went behind the secret base, where Nixon showed Gleason flying saucers as well, based on the video, apparently, and the body. But it's still a UFO story. Then, of course, it is worth paying attention to the newsreel, which is present in the frame for just a couple of seconds, and contains a lot of interesting information. So, the first thing you should pay attention to is the inscription in the lower left corner of this firecracker, where it says occupier. Number 5, by the way, it means that 4 occupiers were before. But it doesn't matter. The main thing is the word occupier itself. An occupier is not equal to a pilot, not equal to a person, not equal to a sergeant or an officer. An occupier is someone who was inside an undefined object. And moreover, the word occupier is not found in the documents that were declassified by the US Department of War and the FBI in Russia. As part of a large release of information on unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial life, and so on. This word, in short, is not there. But it occurs in a completely different document, and it is called as a division for interplanetary phenomena or interplanetary phenomenon unit. This is a controversial document, allegedly was prepared in July 1947. It talks about 2 places where unidentified objects fell in New Mexico. Plus, the military allegedly found the wreckage of the device, technical elements, and the body of the creature. That is, those very occupiers. Please note that the authenticity of this document has not been officially confirmed, but there is also no full-fledged refutation that it is 100% fake. And only this document mentions the word occupier. Of course, the frame where the character of Colin Firth deserves special attention. A variety of sensors are connected, with the help of which he appears next to other people, as if his projection arises. This sends us away completely to a strange period in American history, namely when the Stargate program was actively funded. This is a real secret program of the United States of America, in which military intelligence studied a person's psychic abilities, as well as farsightedness. That is, attempts to obtain information about people, objects, or places at a distance without the usual communication channels. Yes, in the truest sense of the word, people, being in specially equipped offices, received extrasensory information about other people, objects, political figures, or so. Programs. Moreover, it was not only the United States of America that funded such projects. The Soviet Union was doing the same thing. The main stars of the Stargate project are Angela Ford, Hal Puthoff, Joe McMoneagle, Skip Edwater, Edwin May, Pat Price, and Ingo Swann. Many participants of this program are still alive, and they do not disdain to attend American podcasts, where they talk about how life was arranged inside the program, and they share their experiences and subtleties, and what objects. Often they were put on the analysis. However, not all of them. Of course, they are divided due to the fact that many of them still hold various NDAs, or non-disclosure agreements. In other words, some of the information they possess is still a state secret. And now, returning to the character of Colin Firth, to many people who watched the trailer for the day, the disclosure may seem that. And even more so to ordinary people, it may seem that what is happening in this trailer is outright fiction. However, I have to admit personally that no, it has nothing to do with fiction. Anyway, what happens to Colin Firth, and when his projection appears in front of the girl? It is clear that this has no direct connection with the Stargate program, where people who, by the way, were called remote viewers or visionaries in English, were engaged in intelligence or extrasensory intelligence, or, as they say in the US, espintelligence. But, as we know, no program really closes after it is closed. She's transforming, and, most likely, the same thing happened with the Stargate project. And even if you get away from the Stargate project, which closed in the early 90s, now there is a startup that is called as an alter ego. The alter ego gives you the power of telepathy, but only for the thoughts you want to share. You speak the same way as usual, but without sound. By and large, it shows what an ordinary person can call telepathy, in general, is feasible with the help of technology. It is clear that if you delve into this technology, then you will not find any reference, even to telepathy there. However, the technology is very interesting, and it is important to understand that there is a huge pool of technologies, hidden from ordinary people. And what we get today, and consider the peak for, say, the military-industrial complex, is probably at least 10 years behind. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, let me explain it even more simply. We know that video calls exist. So, give 15 years of this technology, maybe 20. And what is happening now during the trailer for Disclosure Day will turn out to be true. And you won't need a phone to see another person in front of you. It will be enough to connect a couple of gadgets to yourself, and you and a friend, for example, with whom you communicate, will be at the same table, while physically in completely two different places. Another element of the trailer that caught my attention, this is the moment where the main character asks the girl if she understands the speech that Emily Blunt speaks when she broadcasts her message there through her. I do not know who. Do you understand what she's saying?
I hear her. It's gibberish. I can't understand it.
And I can. We are referred to hybridization. Hybridization of a human and an alien. The first person to admit the possibility of hybridization of a human and an alien in the civilian segment was again David Jacobs, a ufologist who analyzed hundreds of audio recordings of regressive hypnosis. After which he came to the conclusion that something similar to hybridization was taking place, and he allowed that people, some of those present on Earth, may not be quite human.
And I see the needle. And it's bigger than any needle I've ever seen. And I asked him what he's going to do with it, and he said, just it's the most dead simple thing. And I asked him why. And he said he just wanted to put it in my face.
Then, this theory was picked up by some CIA agents who began to develop it after the end of their official career. And then various congressmen, such as Tim Burchett or Matt Gaetz, are talking about it today. If you are interested in former CIA agents, then for example, Louis Lizanda or, what's his name? I forgot. John Ramirez. Here, by the way, I would like to add that as soon as the topic of crossing a human and an alien in the American segment of ufology pops up, the Griot Agreement immediately automatically pops up after it. What is it? There is some story according to which in 1954, Dwight Eisenhower, the President of the United States, concluded an agreement with the classic gray aliens that in exchange for technology, the United States would allow them use your population as some biological material for experiments. Another element of the trailer that is worth paying attention to if you are interested in ufology, and you want to understand what is happening on the screen, is a strange artifact that is in your hands. Emily Blunt, then Colin Firth. This is a direct reference to modern ufology, at least since the 2000s. There is a certain character whose name is, or rather, not a character, but really a living NASA scientist, who is located directly in the command center, whose name is, like Tim Taylor. In real life, Tim Taylor is not just some person who holds a very serious position at NASA, responsible for launching space missions. He is most likely one of the few who is really admitted to the truth about the UFO phenomenon. And when there is a person in the public field who has experienced a serious experience of interacting with something paradoxical, and even more so with unidentified flying objects, or who claims that he was abducted, next to this person is sure to soon. If this experience is authentic, Tim Taylor pops up. One of these stories has become very popular, is the story of Chris Blatso. In short, and in very general terms, in 2007, Chris experienced not just the experience of abduction or loss of time, which is also very characteristic of ufology, but also contacts with the devil knows what. Of course, these were unidentified flying objects. Chris also communicated with the devil, understand what. After that, Chris was magically cured of Crohn's disease, which literally ties you to the toilet. And it's all documented. And the Chris story, it is very popular in the United States of America. And in the end of ufology, it is also extremely popular. So, in Chris's life, as soon as these strange events related to unidentified flying objects occurred, Tim Taylor immediately appeared. And Tim Taylor has it with him. When he saw Chris, there was an extremely strange object that he handed to Chris and decided to see how this object would react. And he saw that Chris had some contact with this object. I do not know with what it was all measured, but Tim Taylor, after seeing the reaction of the object to Chris, asked him, "Why are you?" In turn, Chris answered him, "I don't know." The last thing I would like to mention in this video is my own indignation. I'll explain what I mean now. I communicate with a variety of people from 16 to 85 years old, and among these people may be unlucky. But there are no those who are categorically against or openly negative about the idea that we are not alone. On the other hand, watch the comments in other social networks. And the question arises, are people really ready to disclose information about unidentified flying objects, or that we are not alone? And this question is sideways for one simple reason. Some people are not ready for this information. They are not ready for the internet and for normal communication. But if this fragment is removed, if this element of life in the form of inadequate comments and inadequate attitude to the broader picture of the world is cut out, then we get a very interesting one. An interesting story where millions of people on our planet, with different attitudes to politics, religion, with different levels of education and taste preferences, are generally ready to accept the idea that we are not alone. And that's great. Another point. Will the part of the world's population that wants to get it? The truth about unidentified flying objects is really the truth, given that the truth is not the dish that is delivered by most states on our planet. Probably not. We will be delivered something else instead of the truth. We will get echoes of the truth, and then we will have to deal with this on our own, as with everything. But there is one good point that concerns ufology. Whether you are a skeptic here or not, and it is as follows. No state is inhabited. Classifies information about what is not there. And as we know, history shows the following. Everything that is somehow connected with unidentified flying objects, as a rule, has always been classified by various states. Therefore, the initiative of the United States of America to disclose data on unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial life should not be treated with very much enthusiasm and optimism. But somewhere between the words, it's always possible. Find echoes of the truth.
All of this is true.